passionate, driven, enthusiastic, euphoric. This is who we are as entrepreneurs. But how we leverage these incredible attributes to dream and build businesses that scale and grow is what this podcast is all about. Hello, I'm attorneypreneur Josh Brown, and welcome to Franchise Euphoria. Hello, welcome back to another episode of Franchise Euphoria. I am thrilled today to have Mr. Mark Deal on the show. Mark is the managing partner of Foreign Investor Resource Group, where business and immigration meet. His company works with foreign nationals, domestic entrepreneurs, international fund managers, and U.S. immigration attorneys to create custom U.S. CIS immigration business plans. Mark is the founder, creator, and host of a great podcast called the U.S. Immigration Podcast, which dives into the business of U.S. immigration and the impact of immigration on U.S. business. Hello, Mark, and welcome.
Hey, Josh Brown. How are you?
I'm doing awesome, man. I'm excited to dive into this topic of immigration and franchising because, quite frankly, as you and I talked about off air a little bit, it's an area I don't really talk about that much. I mean, you know, with my practice and my focus being more on U.S. And franchising related to the U.S. But I think it's going to be fascinating to hear how we dissect immigration and franchising and how there actually is a really big impact on U.S. Franchisees and franchisors.
Oh, I definitely agree. I think there's a lot of overlap, a lot of synergies. And that's why, when I met you a couple of months ago down in Dallas and we just started speaking, it's like, look, we gotta get on a hot mic and share some of these thoughts and ideas with our audiences. And I know you've been on my show, shared some of your insight about franchising, and which a lot of, our audience is excited about, wants to learn about. So I'm happy to return the favor.
Yeah, so before we dive into the weeds here, tell us about your background. Tell us about what you're a veteran, and which is
yes, I am.
thank you for your service. But dive into how did you get into this?
Oh, yeah. If I draft out the story of the weaving thread that builds my body of work, it could, it weaves a tapestry left to right. So as you mentioned, I was in the service. I was a U.S. Navy nuke, basically the guys that operate the nuclear reactors on submarines and aircraft carriers. So I did that for about 6 years. And I left, which my father did 35 years in the Navy. So I got out pretty quick, considering. And I went into corporate America. Actually, I went to work for a software company for about 2 years, and we were bought by General Electric. So I spent about another decade at GE, and I served a number of different roles because I was looking to find my voice and where I fit. So I went the engineering route because my background was electrical engineering. Did some operations, did finance and contract risk, went into sales and marketing. And I was really just trying to draft out my own plan. As people were telling me, hey, Mark, sit down in a seat long enough, we'll make you an executive in this particular, business arena. I'd want to move on to something else. So no, I figured this out. Let me move on. So that's when I founded Foreign Investor Resource Group. As you mentioned, we work with foreign nationals as well as domestic U.S. immigration attorneys and people looking to raise capital through foreign investment. We do that through business plans, economic analysis, targeted employment area assessments, a lot of other business documents to substantiate these visa petitions and to support these investments. But yeah, in a nutshell, that's really the story from Navy, GE, and FERG.
So how did what made you think up this idea? Because I think you thought up this concept, this business, because you felt like there was a void in the marketplace. Can you speak to that?
Sure. Yeah, that's certainly what I felt. I got my MBA back in 2008. And at the time, my wife was an immigration attorney, and she was working on a particular petition for a business person. And it was one that was a little hairy, and she needed a little bit more substantiation. They needed essentially a business plan to say, hey, look, this person is investing a substantial amount of money into this enterprise. So therefore, they should qualify for this petition. But it covered a lot of ground and a lot of areas that really the immigration attorneys typically don't do. And back at that time, 2008, they would go to CPAs and the certified public accountants would write a plan, but really not meet the needs of immigration. I was coming fresh out of my MBA from Emory, so I said, sure, I could do that. So I wrote one for my wife, and then I wrote a few for some of her friends and close colleagues in the Atlanta area. And a couple of years later, in 2010, I'm like, look, there's a need here. So I partnered up with a PhD economist who could really do the really deep analytical grunt work with job analysis and those sorts of things. And we've expanded our team to really service more foreign nationals and more immigration attorneys.
So break it down for the audience. What is a foreign national?
A foreign national, simply put, is someone who's not a U.S. resident. I mean, it may be your neighbor who may be a resident and not just own their home, but actually be a resident of the United States. But they're also a foreign national. They are a citizen of a foreign country. Some people may say aliens or non-resident aliens, but me as a Star Trek fan, whenever I start thinking of alien, my mind goes completely off track.
Exactly. Well, so how does I know we said at the outset, we're going to tie in the immigration and franchising, foreign national and franchising base. Let's dive into that because I know we've got some limited time here, and I really want to expand on this whole thing and kind of break it down and explain to the audience why it's such a big thing, why they should care, why it's an important aspect of what's going on in the world of franchising.
Sure, I'd love to. And again, thanks for this opportunity because it allows me to really dive into this. But so, for example, a foreign national that is looking to come into the U.S., but perhaps they don't want to be an employee. They're not coming in through an H-1B visa program or some of the other visa programs. Perhaps they're not marrying a foreign national and coming in through a fiancé visa. They may, like many of your listeners, are more entrepreneurial in nature. They want to come to the U.S. and they want to live the American dream and own a piece of their own American dream. And a lot of them, when they come to me, they're looking for franchises. And that's really where some of this bridge is at. Foreign nationals that are looking to start or buy or otherwise, engage in a business model through franchising. So there's a number of different visa categories. Maybe I'll get those out in front. So, for example, the E2 and the EB5, those would be different visa categories where people are putting down a sum of money into a business, and they may use that money to essentially start and run and operate the business. And there's different criteria, but I'll leave it at that.
No, that's good. I mean, so I'm curious from what you're hearing. I mean, you had said that, there's a lot of foreign nationals interested in franchising. What is it that you're hearing from them that interests them in the franchise model?
Sure. It takes away a lot of the risk. And I say a lot of the risk, it's a lot of the perceived risk, right? So these are people leaving their home country. Perhaps they're leaving their native language, may not be English, and they're coming over to this country. They have to, learn the language. They have to learn to drive on the correct side of the street, whether that be left or right or what have you, these interstates. They're learning about the public schools and our tax systems. There's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of unknown. So when it comes to starting and running their own business, they look at franchises as an easy way to say, yes, I can put my money into this model. There's an operating book of procedures. I can open that up on Monday and, perhaps close it on Friday, but essentially run my business by that procedure. And a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them gravitate to that idea because they look at it as their way to get into the U.S. and to get into business ownership and entrepreneurship in the U.S.
So how do you help them then with the plans that you put together?
Sure. So once they've identified what they want to invest in, and sometimes through various marketing channels, we get engaged even further upstream than that. But once they have identified what they want to invest in, say if it's a franchise model or some other business, we have to substantiate that investment in the eyes of immigration, USCIS. And we know the criteria for various visa types. So we work with the foreign nationals. We work with the immigration attorneys. We go through various documents as well as franchise agreements, and we put together a comprehensive business plan that is palatable to the adjudicator, the person reviewing the case for for its ability to meet that visa criteria. So we highlight the elements that support that case, and yeah, essentially that's what we do with regard to visa specific business plans.
Yeah, so I'm curious about the whole breakdown of the process because I've actually been involved in one of these from a while back. It didn't really materialize, but I had been approached by somebody who was looking to come to the United States and do it through the purchase of a franchise and through that sort of a visa. There seemed to be a lot of hurdles to get over, and that ultimately led to it not happening.
Certainly.
Yeah, and I'm curious if you could sort of highlight what some of those hurdles are and how people are effectively able to get around them.
Wow. Yeah, that's really case by case, but I'll try to highlight and hit a couple of the big points so that way your listeners can understand that. And it's funny, before I begin, Josh, you mentioned how you've been involved in some of this before. I've also been invited into domestic franchisors office, and they were asking us, how do we appeal more to foreign nationals? So it's quite interesting. The more you think about it, the more you think, yeah, there has been this overlap in the past. So but to answer your question, what are some of the the big items to look out for? It really depends on the visa category, and it depends on their nation, where they're from, and whether we have a treaty with that nation or not. But I'll say predominantly for franchises, it would be the E2 visa. So that E2 visa, some of the sticking points on that would be they need to make a substantial investment, essentially enough money to start, run, and operate the business without any future insurgence of cash. It needs to be non-marginal, such that it needs to do more than just employ themselves and their family members. They actually need to create jobs. Now, if we were to look at EB-5s, they need an EB-5 visa. They need to create at least 10 jobs per investor. And it goes into source of funds, which is really, where's the money coming from? Is it a legitimate source of funds? But I think really where it breaks down is what's the amount of money that you're putting in, and do you have the background and experience in order to make this venture successful? And really, that's where franchises help out, because if someone is investing in a franchise model, they can easily say, look, this model works because there is so many number of domestic people that are investing in this and having their businesses run. I can do this too.
Now, so you mentioned about meeting with domestic franchisors and talking about that. I am curious because, from one perspective, you look at this and you'd say franchising, like any other business model, is challenging, right? I mean, it's these
Yes.
are not businesses in a box. That's a big misnomer. And you have to run and you have to operate these businesses like you would any other small business. And so I see the advantages from the foreign national side, where if they're wanting to come to the U.S. and do it through one of these visas, it makes a lot of sense because you are getting that system, you're getting that operations plan, so you're getting sort of that guidebook. I'm curious, what's the benefit from the franchisor side? Because there's already a lot of challenges, and now you add language barrier, now you probably add some different custom aspects and other kinds of things
Certainly.
that are going to present other challenges. What makes it interesting and exciting for the franchisor?
Well, I think it's another market channel. Say, for example, if they know how to tap into their domestic market channels, how to find, new franchisees for their franchise model, tapping into the foreign national model is really just I think essentially another market channel on how to get more franchisees. So it's nothing that they would want to be exclusive on, but I would say they should at least be aware and perhaps even sensitive on some of the criteria, as well as some of the challenges that the foreign nationals face.
Yeah, no, I mean it seems like a natural progression to the wide open world we live in now, right? Where I can just as easily communicate with somebody in China than as I can with you in Georgia, right? And
Yeah.
I'm in Indiana, and so we're in this way. So it makes perfect sense. Now I'm curious, in your experience, have there been certain types of franchises that you've seen are more prevalent for this type of foreign national investment versus others?
Sure. I've seen a lot of the food franchises. So, for example, not to mention any names, but people that make sandwiches or people that make ice cream. I've seen
There's a few of those out there.
exactly, exactly, and I think it's because those are well understood. I've tried to place. Well, again, not that I place. I work with dependent and independent consultants, and I allow them to represent the franchises. And we, as you said, essentially we're the bridge between business and immigration. So that's when we come into support. So I'll let them do their thing, but I see them sometimes try to place somebody in a say like a massage franchise or some other more exotic franchises or photography franchises, and they may not work. And I think it's a lot to do with, well, people know that, well, you need to eat and you like treats. So the food and the ice cream I've seen play off pretty well. Plus, there's that job component, right? So it's a real store that you're opening up, and you're going to have people in place to run the business. So it's a non-marginal job in that it creates or a non-marginal business in that it creates jobs. So
it's likely going to be
criteria.
Yeah, it'll be more brick and mortar type places where there's growth opportunities and you've got employees and that sort of thing.
Right. I mean, that being said, I've also seen the exotic cases where people invest in an internet model, and how they have a center of operations or jobs distributed across the U.S. as well as internationally. But the majority of the cases, especially at the E2 franchise level, I'd say probably your food and dessert franchises.
So if I'm speaking to a consultant, or if a consultant comes to me and says, "Hey, I've got an interested buyer. He or she's a foreign national. I'm not exactly sure how to make all this work." How could I explain to the consultant about what you guys will do to bridge that gap? Because I think it's something that you definitely touched on, but I'd love to break it down a little bit more so people have a real clear understanding. Because when you say, yeah, we prepare their plans, we do that. What is that bridge, and why is it necessary?
Well, first off, I ask, are they already working with an immigration attorney? We don't have any immigration attorneys in-house because we work with so many immigration attorneys across the nation. I don't want anyone to think that we're going to represent their clients through their petition, vice them. So that's one of the first screening questions I ask is, do you have an immigration attorney? And if they don't, I ask, would they like a referral? And again, that's something else that we provide free, because I want people to have the best representation possible. So I ask, what languages do they speak, and where do they want to live? And I'll look into my network and see if I have a couple of immigration attorneys that fit that bill. So I'll refer that out. Now, if they tell me that, no, this is definitely something that they want to do themselves, then, to be honest, Josh, I also kind of flip it around on them and say, look, well, we have, as Foreign Investor Resource Group, we have tons of resources. We could do the work for you, or you could subscribe to our blog, listen to our podcast, download some of our free checklists. Perhaps you could self-service your own business plan as well.
But you get paid. You get paid for actual plans, though. I mean, that's the hard deliverable, or is it a consulting model too?
It really depends. I would say it really goes down to just looking at the P&L. Most of the documents that we prepare at the E2 visa level is our business plans. They can't really benefit from the economic analysis, such as larger investment funds for foreign nationals can take benefit of. Sometimes we'll get involved with a targeted employment area assessment, but then again, that's very few and far between for a franchise. We've only done one of those for a franchise model this year. I'd say the majority of the billable work is for complete and comprehensive business plans. We also have incremental products to say, look, if you know what your business is going to do and you know how to state it, but you just need a marketing analysis, here you go. Or if you need a executive action summary or some type of boilerplate for immigration, we have some of those other products and services as well. But yeah, I really like to refer people out to our free checklist and say, get creative. When they need us, they know they need us. And that's when they're just basically so inundated with the process, as you mentioned, because it can be complicated. complicated. So we'll come in and do the full and comprehensive business plan. But first, I don't advise people on their immigration situation. I tell people all the time on my podcast as well as during consults that I'm not an immigration attorney. I've worked on hundreds of these cases, but I can't legally advise you. But I can give you some critical questions to ask for your immigration attorney or for your your franchise representative to see if this is a good fit for you.
Well, that's interesting. So you're like a strategic advisor.
That's a good way of saying it. Yeah. I mean, we do have some paid ongoing consulting, but it's very few and far between. And these are people that know that they know what they don't know, and they're just feeling out a lot of different areas. So we'll do a feasibility for this and a feasibility for that, but really that's not the bulk of our work. The bulk of our work is giving free information to people so they're empowered to decide for themselves what they want to do, and then once they put the aim on their target and they're ready to pull the trigger, they just want some better bullets in the chamber. Really, that's where we come in.
Now, do you help them identify the type of franchise, or do you leave that to others?
I leave that to others. Again, that's really not our core competency as well. We'll work with dependent and independent consultants and really help them with understanding the needs of the foreign national. Because sometimes they may say, hey, I have this great franchise. It does this or that. And I have to throw in the block and say, no, we can't do that. For example, I had one the other day was for an EB5. So this particular person had to invest at least $1 million or down to $500,000 if we could prove that it was in a targeted employment area. So they had to effectively use that amount of money as well as create enough jobs. In this case, it was a dependent franchise consultant. I'm trying to get those words correct. So, Josh, you definitely know better than I do.
It was somebody who had a network of franchisors.
Exactly. So, and that really, that's. I'll start the level where there's people that place at the foreign national level directly, and then I'll go to the dependent, then I'll go to independent, and just keep stepping up that way, whether it's a fit. But anyway, in this instance, they were proclaiming that they had a great investment. In fact, it was only $350,000 startup costs, and then I had to throw the brakes on and say, well, no, this person has to invest at least $500,000 and has to create so many jobs within such a time frame. So what else do you have? But we worked out a strategy to where they could actually get to those locations. So it worked out.
Well, that sounds interesting, Mark. I mean, it's serious. It's some good insight into what you do, because I've obviously talked to you a number of times off the air, and I think it's a worthwhile and worthy type service and a necessary service. In many respects, but for purposes of this interview, just in terms of helping that foreign national come to the United States, but also helping domestic franchises here, expand their network of people so that, they're not just, they are looking at global opportunities as well. And there's really, it's a great fit to get people from foreign countries into the system, into their franchise systems, to see how they work out.
I think so, and I love the concept of franchises, especially for foreign nationals, and that's why. Oh, when I met you a couple months ago, I couldn't put your number down.
Well, I appreciate
great talking to you, Josh.
Well, yeah, and before we end, I want to get to know you a little bit, or let the audience get to know you. So I've sort of devised these 5 questions that I've been asking people of late, that I just want you to rattle off the first thing that pops in your head, and then we'll say goodbye. So I'm going to start off with number 1. What's the most important business or other discovery that you have made in the last year?
Oh, I can't succeed without people. Yeah, those around me.
What is one word you would use to describe yourself as a child?
Inquisitive.
That's great. Fill in the blank. If you really knew me, you'd know.
Oh, that's to say I even know myself. That's hard. If you really know me, you would know I could be thinking 3 things at once while I'm speaking.
That's great. Multitasker. Multi-thinker.
Yeah, unfortunately a multi-thinker. So.
What characteristic do you most admire in others?
Integrity.
And finally, given one choice, would you rather be liked or respected?
I'd say respected. It goes back to that integrity thing I look for in others.
Well, very good. I love getting this. I think these questions give great insight into the person I'm actually interviewing as opposed to just the business that they're involved in. So thanks for participating, and thanks for being a great guest today. And I'll leave it in your corner here for the last word on anything else you want to add to the conversation, and where people can find you and get a hold of you if they want to reach out to you.
Yeah, sounds great, Josh. Probably the best way to reach me would be through my podcast, usimmigrationpodcast.com. And of course, you can search on iTunes, Stitcher, what have you for that show. And again, if you're looking at a franchise model, or say that you're a franchisor and you want to appeal to foreign nationals a little bit more, or perhaps you're working directly with a foreign national and want to understand, what are some of the intricacies of their immigration and how the business and the immigration case tie in together, come check us out.
Sounds great, Mark. Thank you so much. I look forward to staying in touch.
Thank you, Josh.
Thanks for being with us today on the Franchise Euphoria podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to go to iTunes and provide a review. Also, please remember that although Josh Brown is a licensed and practicing attorney, nothing contained in this podcast should be construed as legal advice, because it is not. The information contained in this podcast is general and educational in nature, and none of it should be relied upon as legal advice. That being said, if you have questions for Josh and would like to contact him, please email him at josh@franchiseeuphoria.com. Thank you so much for listening, and we hope you tune in to our next weekly episode.